Hey, what's up everybody? Ralph here. So today's topic, I want to share with you my top 10 tips for maintaining good credit. So regardless if you have good credit or bad credit, these tips should help you when it comes to managing your credit in the future. Right? So my first tip is making sure you establish credit in your own name. Now this is particularly important for, let's say, married couples. I know we tend to think once you get married, you share everything. But the one thing that you don't share is your credit score. Right, so it's important to make sure that when you're applying for things, make sure you're applying it for under your name. Obviously when you're purchasing an asset like a property, obviously that's going to be, in both person's name. But other than that, if you're purchasing a car, you're opening credit cards, you want to make sure you're opening that in your name, because you want to make sure when you're establishing credit, you have your own individual score. So you want to make sure you're maintaining your own individual credit. All right, so that's an important thing that people, when it comes to maintaining credit, you want to make sure understand that each person has their own credit score. So making sure that you're maintaining your credit score for that individual is important. All right. So number two is making sure you keep your accounts open. Now, let's say you have 3 credit cards, right? And let's say you only use one of them. I know people tend to say like, I'm not using those other credit cards, let me close them. But you don't want to do that because that could impact your credit score. A couple of videos ago I talked about, I had a topic about, does closing credit cards affect your credit score? And it can affect your credit score because remember, one of the most important factors when it comes to your credit score is utilization rate. All right, for those that don't know, it's basically the ratio between your balance and your limit. So let's say you have a credit card limit of say 10,000 and you have a balance of 5,000. That ratio is going to be at 50%. Okay, so the higher that percentage is, the lower your score is going to be. So you want to make sure you maintain a low ratio. All right, you want to make sure you keep a low percentage. All right, you want to keep it real low, particularly below 30%. All right, I keep mine under 10%, but usually the barometer is like 30%. All right, but the lower the better. All right, so let's say you have 3 credit cards, and each of them are 5,000, and let's say you want to close 2 of them. So you're going to go from a balance credit limit from 15 to 5,000. And let's say you start using that credit card, and let's say you put $1,000 on that credit card. So now, because you only have one credit card, that's only 5,000. That's gonna, and you use 1,000 of that 5,000, it's gonna be 20%. So as opposed to if you had 3 of those those credit cards open, and you had a $15,000 limit, so that 1,000 would have been, a balance on a $15,000 credit limit, which would have kept you at a lower percentage, which would have, would have helped your credit score. But since you only have one credit card, it's going to lower your credit. So you want to make sure you keep those credit cards open. You don't have to use them, but just make sure you keep them open. All right, which leads me to point number 3. So if you have those credit cards open, at least use those. If you're not using them, just use them at least twice a year. Because if you don't use those credit cards that you're putting to the side, then they won't report to the credit bureau. And if you don't report to the credit bureau, that's going to affect your utilization rate, because it's going to almost seem like you don't have any credit cards. So it's going to say, all right, these are not being used. He clearly only has one credit card at 5,000 instead of having 3 credit cards at a $15,000 limit. So you want to make sure if you're not using those 2 other credit cards, you want to make sure you're at least using them at least twice a year. Right? Just use them twice a year, pay off the balance, and just let at least it reports, because you're going to get credit for that credit history. Right? And that accounts for 15% of your credit score. So credit history is very important. All right. So number 4, paying off past credit cards that aren't in collections or charge-offs. Right? So if you're late on some credit cards, you want to make sure that you're at least paying them down. Right? Like I remember I had videos where I said I was in $30,000 of debt. And you want to make sure that if you're late on a bunch of payments, that you're at least paying them down, because obviously that affects your credit score the most. That if your credit cards are maxed out, you want to make sure you pay that thing down. But let's say you have credit cards that are in like charge-offs or collections for at least 2 years. Don't touch those, because the way credit scoring works is it hurts your credit score the more recent it is. So let's say you had a late payment, let's say you had a late payment this month as opposed to 2 years. That late payment that you had 2 years ago is going to have a less of an impact on your credit score than the one the late payment that happened this month. All right, so that's how it works. It's weird how credit works, but something that was like 2 years ago doesn't impact your credit score as something that happened more recently. All right, so if you have something that's 2 years ago, then don't touch it. All right, and if you do want to, obviously eventually you do want to resolve that. The thing you want to do is when you start negotiating with these creditors or collections, don't make a payment. Don't make payments on them. you want to knock it off in one shot, because once you start making payments, then that 2 years becomes more recent, and then your score is going to drop. All right. So once you, the way it works is like the date of last activity. So if you make a recent payment on it, it's going to record all the data from those past 2 years, and it's going to drop your score. So if you're going to negotiate with them, just make sure you give it one big shot. Like when I owed $30,000 of credit card, I didn't make a payment installments. I knocked it off in one shot. All right. And credit improved a little bit after that. All right. So that's number 5 is make sure your credit cards are reporting the maximum limit, right? I think some credit cards tend not to. I think some people say American Express. So for example, let's say you have a credit limit of $5,000. You want to make sure that it's recorded in your credit reports that it's a $5,000 limit, because if it doesn't record that, let's say you have a balance of like $2,000, it's going to seem like your credit card is maxed out because you have a balance of $2,000, but they're not recording a limit, right? So you want to make sure if you notice that on your credit report that there's no maximum amount recorded, you want to give them a call and say, hey, can you report this in the credit bureau, so you get credit for that, so it's not affecting your score negatively. And if they don't do that, then you say, okay, you know what? I mean, you give them a call and say, can you report the maximum, the maximum credit limit? And if they don't, you say, all right, cool. You know what? You just pay it off and you don't use it, right? Because you don't want that affecting your credit score. Right? I mean, yeah, you don't want that affecting your credit score. Just give them a call and say, all right, if they don't do it, just say, I'm gonna pay this off, and then just don't use it. And obviously, just use it twice a year so you can get at least the credit. Don't close it. Just make sure you're recording the credit history. All right. So we're number 6, right? Make sure. Yeah. So you want to make sure you're setting up a system for paying bills on time. Now, like I talked about, the most important factor when it comes to your credit score is payment history. That accounts for 35% of your credit score. Paying your bills on time is very important. Now, one technique that you can do if you're someone that struggles with managing paying bills on time, a good technique to do is setting your payments to auto payment, right? Now, for me, at first I was skeptical of doing this because I like to manage. I like to make sure I'm managing my accounts myself. I used to like to go in there and pay my bills on time. But then once you start getting multiple credit cards, it's hard to keep track of all that. So what I did was just, I just set up my automatic payment. So every time, things happen, when time the payment comes, it gets paid. Because you're busy, right? You have so many things to do that's easy to forget. And if you forget that, being forgetful can cost you a lot on your credit report, because one missed payment can drop your credit score by 50, 60, 70 points, and you don't want to do that. So just make sure, if you're someone that's really busy, just make sure to set your payments to auto payment. All right, you have the auto payment features on your bank account. Just make sure it's getting paid automatically right there, and you can just set it and forget it. All right. So where we at? Number 7. All right, so you want to make sure you're ordering a free copy of your credit report every year. Right? This is important because it's almost like a physical, right? Every year you get a physical, you want to get checked out, you want to make sure everything is working properly, you're making sure that everything is clean, that you don't have any things that's going to affect your health. Well, credit report is the same way. So every year you should order your credit report, and you can get that for free, right? If you go to annualcreditreport.com, you can order your credit report from all 3 bureaus for free once a year. So you want to make sure you're checking that, make sure everything is good, everything is reported correctly, making sure you don't have any issues with identity theft. This is important to do, all right? And especially if you're able to get it for free. So you make sure you check on it every year just to make sure everything is good, everything is clean. It's almost like it's an annual checkup on your credit. All right, so just like you would get an annual checkup on your health, go to your doctor to make sure everything's good, you want to do the same thing when it comes to your credit. All right? So number 8, you want to make sure you pay your rent and mortgage on time. All right, so I think when it comes to rent, I think there are new laws that are requiring landlords to report rent payments to the bureau, which is really good for those that rent. Because when it comes to mortgage, obviously every time you make a payment on your mortgage, that's being recorded to the credit bureaus, right? It only makes sense that if you're a responsible person that's renting, you should also get credit for that as well. Right? Because paying rent is also a good indicator to lenders that you're also going to pay your mortgage. All right, so now I think they're requiring laws where most landlords have to report that, that person that's paying their rent on time, they have to report that payment history to the bureaus. So that's also a good thing. So you want to make sure you're paying both your rent and mortgages on time, because like I said, payment history is a very important factor when it comes to your credit score. All right. Now, number 9 is having 2 or 3 major credit cards. Okay. Now, once you're establishing credit, you want to make sure you have like a good number is having like 2 to 3 trade lines. So I mean, obviously the bigger credit cards are Discover, Visa, and MasterCard, right? You want to have like at least 3 of them. So at least when it comes to like applying for property, you want to purchase a property. These are good, things to have on your credit, because lenders want to see that you're good at managing. They want to see how you manage credit. So having credit cards that you're paying on time, that you have established, and they like to see a good mix that you know how to manage money. These are things you want to establish, right? And it usually takes a couple months. If you're someone new that doesn't have credit, once you start getting these credit cards, it takes like a couple months for it to record into the bureaus. So you want to make sure when you're establishing credit, get at least 2 or 3 of them, three in particular. I don't know what happened. Hold on. The lights went out. I don't know what happened. You want to get like at least 2 to 3 of them, which helps with building your credit, right? So number 10 is making sure you pay down credit card balances before paying any extra on installment loans. So an installment loan is like, say, a car bill, right? A car note is installment because you're getting the same payment every month, all right? So you make sure you pay down your credit cards before that, because when you're maintaining good credit, paying down a credit card balance is going to help you more than making payments on an installment loan. So of course you want to make sure you're paying your installment loans because you don't want to miss any payments. But if you're going to put any extra amount, instead of paying that extra payment on the installment loan, put it on a credit card, right? Because that's going to affect you. That affects your score the most, utilization rate, which is 30% of your credit, your credit reporting. So make sure you focus on the credit cards instead of like, you make sure you make the payments on installment loans, but make sure you focus on the credit cards. Put extra payments on that. All right. So those are my top 10 tips. I hope these helpful. I'm sorry about the light. My lights went out, so I apologize for that. But yeah, these are my top 10 tips. So if you have any comments, if you have any questions, make sure you comment down below. Hit the like button, and I'll talk to you guys later. All right. Have a good one.